Cilliers Brink has been selected as the Democratic Alliance and Multi-Party Coalition's candidate for the position of Executive Mayor of Tshwane. He joins us now live from Pretoria. Mr. Brink, thank you so much for your time this evening. So your predecessor, Randall Williams, resigned partially due to pressure over his administration's performance in handling the city's finances. But given the pressure on all opposition coalitions in Gauteng, which we've seen crumbling recently in Ekurhuleni and in the city of Joburg, the reasons behind these pressures are just semantics at the end of the day. If elected, how would you handle this pressure differently to ensure a sustainable coalition in Tshwane?
So I think it's very important to note that unlike Joburg and Ekurhuleni, the multi-party coalition in Tshwane actually has a majority in the council, and that's very important because in the setting of a municipality, if you don't have a majority and you don't have unity of purpose in your coalition, you can't appoint a city manager, you can't discipline senior officials, you can't pass a budget, you can't raise a loan to invest in service infrastructure. And so it's very important, not just for the residents of Tshwane, but for the country, that we make a success of this coalition in Tshwane, because if it doesn't succeed here, then it stands very little chance of succeeding in the rest of the country, perhaps in 2024, when we have national and provincial elections that will not have a clear winner. So what will we do differently? I think we have to firstly focus with laser-like power on getting control of the finances of the city and responding to the negative findings of the AG. The DA, as well as our multi-party coalition partners, regard the finding as very serious. It is indicative of a breakdown of controls. We now need to restore that, and we need to have a clean out where a clean out is necessary. But it's also very important that we focus on the service delivery aspects of the agenda, reduce the number of unscheduled power outages, as well as the effect that load shedding has on basic services, not just the state of the electricity network, but also sanitation, water, and so forth. And of course, we have to look at the job of the Tshwane Metro Police in securing service infrastructure and making sure that Tshwane's workforce is productive, that they deliver value for ratepayers' money. So I think a laser-like focus on that agenda, but also a willingness to cooperate with our coalition partners. I will be meeting them tomorrow morning, the leaders of the local coalition partners, to also get their input, and I'll certainly take their suggestions and comments on board.
So according to the coalition agreement, the DA holds the prerogative when it comes to the candidate who should be selected as mayor. But how confident are you that your candidacy has the support of your coalition partners and would continue to do so if elected?
So the coalition agreement holds that the DA does nominate the mayoral candidate, but only after consultation with coalition partners. That consultation took place today, and yes, the timeline is truncated because, as you mentioned there in the insert, we do have to make sure that the vacuum is filled, that we have a mayor and an adjustments budget as soon as possible before the end of the month. So that meeting happened today. The coalition expressed their support and endorsement for my candidacy. I understand that there were certain reservations, and that I want to discuss with the leaders of the coalition parties. Luckily, we do not have a tug of war over jobs and positions in our coalition in Tshwane. We don't have the Patriotic Alliance as part of this coalition, and that gives me hope. The other thing that gives me hope is that we have a competent city manager. And if I am elected mayor and can constitute my team, I look forward to working with that city manager to build a capital city that works and that works for all of its people.
So some of those reservations are reported to have come from the Action SA party. Can you tell us what those reservations are? Are you at liberty to do so?
So I was not present at this meeting because my candidacy was under consideration. I will therefore be meeting with the leaders of the coalition parties in council tomorrow morning at the earliest opportunity to get more details on this. But I understand that there's concern about the AG outcome and the need to respond to that very quickly. I know that there has been concerns raised about the state of the Rooiwal wastewater treatment plant that affects water supply to Hammanskraal. I understand that, without being even privy to the discussions at the coalition, and I am quite serious to take on those issues and to work with the team to have them resolved.
So you mentioned earlier that the city does need to finalise an adjustment budget before the end of February, and so a mayoral candidate needs to be elected as soon as possible. Do you have any inside information on when that's likely to happen and what's holding up the process?
So the multi-party coalition is currently meeting about this issue, and ideally we should have a mayor elected by Friday, so that gives sufficient time to constitute a MACO that can consider an adjustments budget that must be passed before Tuesday, because that's the last day of February. There are certain provisions in law that allow for a council meeting to be called by the insistence of a certain percentage of the councillors. Those options are being considered. But let me just say that these two issues, the election of a mayor and the passing of an adjustments budget within the legislated timeframe, is an absolute priority for us at the moment, and we'll do whatever we can as a multi-party coalition to make sure that that happens.
So residents have heard so many service delivery promises from various local governments. And while instability at coalition level continues in many parts of South Africa, unfortunately, those service delivery promises are but a pipe dream. You mentioned some of the areas that you want to or hope to change when a little earlier on in the interview. But how do we get to service delivery when these issues of putting people in positions and getting that initial stability take so much time, and then there's changes of government so frequently? What do you think the solution is?
So, as I mentioned before, I think Tshwane has the upside of having the ingredients for a stable coalition, the 50% plus one majority, a unity of purpose. We don't have parties that are extorting other parties to gain positions. Of course, there will be differences of opinion. Positions might even be renegotiated in future, but as we stand in Tshwane, that's the benefit that we have, and we have to make the most of that benefit by electing a mayor, constituting a team, and then getting down to work. As to the bigger issues that prevent services from being delivered, I think that in the past, perhaps, the bold decisions have perhaps not been made, haven't been considered as they should have been. They haven't been made as quickly as they should have been made. And so we don't have the institutional systems in place. There isn't proper performance management. There is perhaps still a very politicized municipal service in Tshwane, the legacy of cadre deployment from the ANC era and so forth. But we can't keep on referring back to the past. We now have to make the bold decisions that have been neglected in the past. We have to cut the non-core expenditure that don't relate to the basics of local government, the basic functions of local government: water, electricity, roads, waste collection, well-lit and well-maintained streets and parks and curbsides. Those things should be the focus, and the other projects and undertakings that the municipality has made over the years must be reconsidered if we are going to keep the municipality stable and sustainable and deliver on the promise of better services.
Well, thank you very much for your time this evening. We will check in with those election proceedings as they take place throughout the rest of the week. That was the DA mayoral candidate for Tshwane, Cilliers Brink.